Some of the rich and powerful are quaking in their boots tonight. That's because Jeffrey Epstein's little black book might end up going public. Also, message to Alex Murdaugh tonight. It is never a good thing if one of your accusers is a uniformed state trooper.
We don't know where all his money is at. So if we don't know that, how do we turn him loose?
Well, he made a heck of a case for keeping Murdaugh locked up, and today he got his answer. Plus, it is the stuff that nightmares are made of, plunging into an ice-cold river and sinking into total doom. Wait, hold on, though. What on earth is she doing? Yeah, I think you see what I am seeing. Meet the rescuer who asked the exact same question. And finally, a shocking wilderness attack right in this woman's driveway. What tumbled out of the Florida darkness and did this? Here's a hint. It was no alligator. All ahead on Banfield. Welcome to Banfield. Who are the Epstein 8? 8 people who headline a little black book of Jeffrey Epstein's that is as secret as the Holy Grail. 8 names of fellow billionaires and playboys who have remained anonymous thanks to a request from Epstein's girlfriend and top lieutenant while she was fighting those pesky sex crimes back in New York. But she lost. She lost that fight and presumably has no reason to keep those names quiet anymore. And that has members of high society shaking in their Ferragamo shoes. The 8 people are listed as John Doe. Very safe nickname. But now Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers are saying it is up to those men or women to fight their own fight to stay anonymous, adding, each of the listed John Does has counsel who have ably asserted their own respective privacy rights. Ms. Maxwell therefore leaves it to this court to conduct the appropriate review. Now, that's good news for Epstein's victim, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who requested that those names be broken wide open to the public. You will remember that she is the woman who claims that Epstein sexually abused her while she was a minor and that Maxwell helped him do it. And she also alleges that Epstein forced her to have sex with Prince Andrew, among other powerful men. So, is Prince Andrew one of these Epstein 8? Who are the others? And what does it mean if someone is part of the Epstein 8? Could they all just be former friends of Epstein who had no idea about his trafficking? Or maybe business associates who simply looked the other way? Or were they willing participants or even accomplices in Epstein's crimes? Powerful people who could themselves face justice. I am joined tonight by Dana Kennedy. She is a national writer for the New York Post who's been covering Epstein for years. Joshua Schiefer is also with me. His firm represented one of Epstein's accusers, and Gloria Allred is a victims' rights attorney. Okay, Gloria, I'm going to just start with you right away because there's a lot of technical I need to get to. There are people listed as John Doe 17, 53, 54, 56, 73, 93, and 151. So naturally, when I see numbers that aren't sequential, I wonder, what about all the people in between? What do you make of this pattern?
Yeah, I have no idea. By the way, I also represent 20 accusers of Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know, and I can understand, however, why the attorneys for these John Does would want to file objections to having the names of their clients being released to the public, because they're concerned about guilt by association. They're concerned that there will be conclusions reached by the public that if Virginia named them in a lawsuit, which she did against Ms. Maxwell in a defamation lawsuit, that maybe, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I can understand why they would make objections, but it sounds as though Ms. Maxwell no longer wants to be part of that fight. She's got bigger problems on her hands than whether those names are released.
Yeah, I mean, lucky for us, right? Especially in the press, when someone doesn't have a need to keep things secret anymore. That's only delightful for journalists like Dana and me. And Dana, by the way, good to see you again. We've been
good
friends and colleagues for, gosh, 22 years now. Hard to believe it, but okay. So Dana, Doe 151. It's a lot. Okay, John Doe 151. Here's what I can tell you about this fella. He is apparently, he has said in documents, and he appears in 47 different documents too, so that's a lot. He says, I'm trying to live a private life, and he's afraid he's going to be hounded by the media if he's outed. I can only imagine that that's the same thing everybody would say. How worried are people in society? Like, what's the inside scoop on what folks who knew Epstein are saying right now about the possibility that they're in there?
Well, on one hand, this could be the big break. I mean, in a lot of ways, the Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell case has become anticlimactic. I mean, he's dead, and she's now in this bizarre new fight. She's hoping for a mistrial. She's hoping maybe for an appeal. You got to figure she's doing some horse trading, Ashley, of her own behind the scenes, because don't forget, she decided to sort of step back and say it's okay if I'm not going to fight to keep these documents sealed. The same day Prince Andrew lost his bid to have the case thrown out. You do have to kind of wonder if she's doing some backroom trading. And while the people, these 8, John Does could be some of the big names that we heard about that were on that flight manifest, there's always a possibility it could be like, it's got an Al Capone vibe to it too. I mean, what if they're like, 7 randos and Prince Andrew? It could be like Jim in accounting from, Elliott Management or Vanguard, people we don't know about who might have a lot of power behind the scenes. I think really all bets are off. It's like an old-fashioned let's make a deal. We have no idea who's behind door number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. It could be something exciting for people like you and me, or it could be like Al Capone's vault, and there's nothing there. There's no cheese in that tunnel.
So here are some of the parlor games, that are out there. And I can see you, Josh, smiling, because this is why it makes such a big story. Really powerful people, the most famous people on the planet. And I'm not using hyperbole. I'm going to actually call up a few names, but not before I give a huge disclaimer. And here it goes. The 8 people that there's actually more. The people that I'm going to show you may very well not be the John Does. All we know is that there is proof that they spent time with Jeffrey Epstein, and we know that because of manifests and flight manifests, obviously, and visits to his Caribbean island, and people who have witnessed parties and events at his various homes. So within that cadre of people, let's just go to the graphic. Former President Donald Trump, for one, is on that list. Former President Bill Clinton is on that list. Let me repeat, it does not mean that any of these names are any of the John Does. Prince Andrew, of course, we mentioned that. Former Senator George Mitchell is also in that group. Former Secretary of the Treasury, Larry Summers, is also included among his pals. Former New Mexico governor, who's also energy secretary, who's also UN ambassador, Bill Richardson. He's on the list of friends of Jeffrey Epstein. And then there are these other names, violinist Itzhak Perlman, actor Kevin Spacey, comedian Chris Tucker, model Naomi Campbell. Then he's had, really extensive business relationships with Bill Gates and Deutsche Bank. So plenty of powerful people at Deutsche Bank as well. So with that said, Josh, I know that that's what keeps coming up, those people, because they're flashy. But Dana just said it. There could be a lot of Joe Schmoes as well. But I want you to answer the issue that's really key here, and that is Joe Schmo or big Uber tycoon, they should be worried, right? There was a reason that they were kept quiet. There's a reason that they're in dozens of documents. This is not all innocuous, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and Dana really did hit the nail on the head when she talked about the idea that all bets are off. We don't have the context into where and when these names appear. We have a lot of speculation. We have a lot of conjecture that they were doing something nefarious, but there were, as established, more legitimate interactions with the Epstein universe. And there are tons and tons of famous names. What I think's interesting about the Joe Schmo is Joe Schmo to you or me isn't Joe Schmo in their world. And their world, once you get into some of these dark corners and back hallways and where the power really lies, these are names that we're not going to know as members of the general public, but in their world are incredibly famous, are deeply influential, and these are the people we talk about pulling the levers of power. These are the hanger-ons and associates of people we all know, and we all know that lots of times people in power don't like to be famous. They like to try to stay behind the scenes. So really, all bets are off, just like Dana said, when we get to these names. The people definitely have an interest in hiding them. They're going to have, or they've already lawyered up. Those lawyers have filed whatever objections, but arguably there's no real need or justification for the privacy anymore. Ms. Maxwell is certainly playing cards with the feds, trying to better her situation. Federal prosecutions never end until you walk out of prison. There's always something that you can do to better your situation. And she may have gotten called on these names and lost that ability. So there's a lot more to this story. A lot of people are probably pretty concerned tonight. And I'll be interested to see what lawyers pop up here in the press denying anything or making affirmative statements, verifying what really happened, trying to set the record out first.
So, Gloria, I want to read a couple more statements. Well, I'm going to get to you right now, but I want to just preface it by some statements from some of these John Does. John Doe number 17 says that he has a, quote, general aversion to being associated with Maxwell and Epstein. I think anybody would say that now. And that the disclosure could cause, quote, substantial embarrassment, annoyance and embarrassment. And so John Doe 73, I think I mixed up the numbers. John Doe 73 said the general aversion to being associated with Maxwell and Epstein and that he could have substantial embarrassment. John Doe 17 said that being associated with all of this would cause him annoyance and embarrassment. Obviously, there's panic, right, Gloria? I know that you travel in circles where you hear things, and not that you're going to name names, which I fully understand if you don't. Are you hearing who the names are?
I'm not hearing who the names are, but, you know, I could speculate, but I would not want to speculate. I would say that the reasons being offered by their attorneys are most likely true as to their clients that don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want their privacy invaded. But is that legally a viable, reason for the court to decide not to release their names? I don't think so. If, in fact, she named them in a lawsuit, which was public, I don't know why they're not even out there, not now, if they were once public. But in any event, we'll have to see what the court does. But all they can do is just decline to give a comment once the names are released, or say that those allegations are not true. And if they say they're not true, they may end up also in another defamation case, as Ms. Maxwell found herself the target of a defamation case when she denied to Virginia, and Virginia sued her for defamation.
So that's what makes it all so fascinating, and probably the reason why this next question might seem moot, Dana, and that is, wouldn't it be smarter to be the people that get out ahead of the story and frame it before all of a sudden it's an embarrassing revelation and they're caught up in national headlines everywhere with a bunch of people that they don't want to be associated with?
That's if you're really playing 3D chess. I guess that's what you do. You'd hire a really good strategist, a really good PR person, and maybe figure you can go on Oprah or something like that and talk about it. But I don't know, even getting in front of it right now is pretty uncomfortable, and they still have the chance that the judge is going to go ahead and keep them sealed. I wouldn't be surprised, because this is a really elite level of people that we're playing with here, and it's really way above our pay grades. And I think we can't even imagine what kind of backroom dealings are going on right now. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell was born into a world in which her father was one of the shrewdest players of all time. And I think she's also concentrating right now on making sure that, the guards don't fall asleep and the cameras don't malfunction.
Very good point, because
Ashley.
that's what people allege happened to Jeffrey. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was just gonna
exactly.
say,
And we really, it's frightening for people to think about losing control of this narrative, and they're making a really tough choice. Are they going to get out front, acknowledge these intimate dealings, which bluntly, these people likely have already acknowledged knowing and being associated with Mr. Epstein for years and years and years. Everybody's been under a microscope with this guy for good reason. So I don't think that their mere knowledge or association with them is going to be much of the story, as much as some of the time and place details. Stories aren't going to add up. Questions are going to get asked. And people of this nature don't want people poking around. They want their privacy. They want to own this story. And I expect some statements to come out so that they can grab the reins. And then sitting down and shutting up, that washes away as long as their name stays out of the news.
This is all, I mean, just
Ashley.
to me, it's fascinating. I think everybody who covered this story for the last, you know how many years since it began. I mean, we're all just sort of waiting with bated breath. I have to cut it there, but I am so thankful to all three of you, Gloria Allred, Dana Kennedy, and Joshua Schiffer. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashley.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, got another top story tonight. Two big breakers, in fact. Alex Murdaugh can't catch a break. And by break, I mean a reduction in the $7 million bond that is keeping that disgraced lawyer in a South Carolina jail cell tonight and for the foreseeable future. If not a state record, $7 million is close. And defendants almost always are allowed to put up the 10% cash to bond out. But Murdaugh, he couldn't even post that. Not even close, according to a state-appointed receiver who has taken charge of his assets in the likely event that those assets are going to have to go to someone that he's harmed. All of this came out in a virtual court hearing a week ago, where the best legal arguments from veteran lawyers on both sides were utterly eclipsed by a South Carolina state trooper. He's down there on the bottom of your screen. He was hit by a car, and then he hired lawyer Alex Murdaugh to help him get an insurance payout. The trooper's name is Thomas Moore, and he told the court, and I'm going to quote him, "He treated me very nice, and he stole every dime I had." I want you to listen to him make his case with Murdaugh himself right there in the top row watching.
His bond does not need to be reduced because all of a sudden, Earl, Mr. Murdaugh don't have no money. Well, guess what? I don't either. I can't pay my medical bills. And I'm going to be forced out of this job because of my injury. And frankly, I wouldn't even be here now if I didn't have bills I have to pay. And that has to be done because that money was blatantly stolen from me.
You know, I just wonder what it's like for Alex Murdaugh to have to sit there and listen to that, right? Today came the bond ruling, and Trooper Moore and the prosecutors, they carried the day. Murdaugh's bid for a lower bond, denied. No early release pending trial, or mostly trials, civil and criminal, likely from a whole host of folks who say Murdaugh did them wrong. I'm joined now by two men who have covered this journey with me for several months now. Andrew Davis is the investigative reporter for NewsNation affiliate WSAV in Savannah. And Eric Bland is the attorney for the sons of the late Murdaugh family, housekeeper. And it was his work that helped to set in motion a dozen criminal indictments, including 48 charges involving 13 clients and more than $6 million. Have you got all that? Okay. So let's start. Andrew, are there any cards left on the table for Alex Murdaugh? Or can he appeal what happened today, or is that it? He's stuck.
I think they can find something else. His lawyers have been chasing anything and everything they can so far. But I think they played their biggest card, which is saying he doesn't have any money. The receivers have control of it all, that it's not going anywhere. They have to take care of these things. And even if he could touch any of this money that, by the way, he owns the entire Moselle property, which is worth millions and millions of dollars, that he has his father's estate in here, which could be worth tens of millions of dollars, is what they said in that hearing right there. He wouldn't do it because he just wants to pay everybody back. And I think Judge Lee really looked at what exactly Mr. Moore was saying, what Mr. Bland's clients have said previously, and what all these victims seem to be saying whether through documentation or words themselves, and said, this man took our money and we don't have any ourselves. Why does he suddenly get something extra now that he doesn't have any? His lawyers have a very tough case on their hands right now, and I think they've got to probably focus on the criminal trial, which is coming up in all these financial cases, before they start worrying about whether they can ever get him back out of jail again.
Right. Okay. So, Eric, I'm running the numbers here. 48 counts related to like skimming the money from clients like yours. 3 from the roadside suicide attempt. Just sort of curious if more are expected to be on the way, because it feels like just about every week there's a new alleged victim that surfaces. What are you hearing?
The grand jury has met, and we do expect it at the end of this week or the beginning of next week that there'll be additional charges, Ashley. A clarion bell rang today for Alex Murdaugh, and that is he has to now accept the fact that he is not most likely going to get out of jail before any of these trials begin. And in our state court, if you're convicted, you're sentenced immediately. So there's the real possibility that Alex Murdaugh will not get out of jail ever again for a long, long time. Two sitting lower court judges in our Supreme Court have basically said that the proper amount of bond has been set. One thing that you didn't talk about, Ashley, is earlier this week, our state Supreme Court denied the habeas corpus petition that Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin had filed to get the Supreme Court to actually sit and make a decision on the bond. They said it's a lower court issue. Judge Lee has looked at this twice. She said that the appropriate amount of bond has been set, and when new charges come, there'll be a new bond hearing. So there is a high likelihood that absent some extraordinary change of circumstances, Alex is not going to ever see the light of day again.
Quick little addendum on that mention at the top of what you just said there, Eric. New charges expected next week. What do you mean?
There's the grand jury's meeting. There's more and more victims, Ashley, that have been uncovered, and these are being brought before the grand jury. Our state grand jury only meets 1 week a month. And so there's only so much information that they could be spoon-fed regarding the victim cases. And it's our expectation from what we hear that there'll be additional charges brought against Alex and others. Finally, I think we're going to have others be charged.
That's
Ashley,
interesting.
there's a lawyer. Lawyer out of Columbia,
Andrew, the thing that I keep forgetting not almost because this is my job, but I have to remind myself is that, oh yeah, on top of all these scams and theft and all these allegations, there are 2 murders that we're still waiting on. And I guess, Andrew, just tell me what you were going to say and add to that, whether these charges that Eric's talking about might include something with regard to those murders.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Ashley, try to add on to what Eric was saying. There's a lawyer, Justin Bamberg, who's a state representative as well, who says he's got 7 more clients. I've been contacted by at least one person who has said, well, the law firm's trying to go ahead and pay us off before we can do something, but we're very confused on how much they're paying us and whether we should start to come forward and see what else we could do as well in these cases. You're looking at the criminal cases, which not just those 2 murders of his wife and son, but also that Stephen Smith case out of Hampton, which is still very much up in the air, and Miss Satterfield's death as well, that there's still investigation into that right now. So what I'm hearing is criminal charges are out there, they are pending, but there's real confusion on whether truly Alex would be the one to be involved, whether it would be someone else or a combination of the 2. So far, I'm hearing very mixed signals on this. Some people say absolutely it's Alex. Other people I'm hearing saying no, that information is not correct right now. So I think SLED's really trying to keep it close to the vest until they can finally put the charges out there.
That's what I call a cliffhanger, which means both of you better keep those seats warm. I will be calling you back momentarily. Andrew, Eric, thank you both. Appreciate it. Okay, here's all the good stuff about Volusia County, Florida. It's got 47 miles of beachfront. It hosts the Daytona 500, and it's home to the Weeki Wachee Mermaids. Seriously, check them out. Here is the not so good. You can sunburn easily. Florida man lives there. And there's some pretty dangerous wildlife, it turns out, lurking in the dark. You know about the alligators and the sharks, but did you know about the black bears? I want you to meet Adie, who was just walking in her driveway with her dog when out of nowhere, a huge black bear lunged out at her, claws out. As Adie tried to run, the bear chased her, tossed her to the ground, and jumped on her back. And lucky for Adie, The neighbors heard her screams and they called for help. And here is the very moment that Volusia County sheriffs arrived on the scene.
Dog is missing. The bear got her.
Bear got
the
her.
bear got the dog.
All right, we have rescue coming to check you out, okay?
He's a big bear. He's a big bear. Yeah.
You said it was two bears?
No, just one bear.
Just one big old bear?
One big old bear.
Okay.
Hey there, can you tell me where you're hurting at?
Over here and in my back. He got me, he kind of like jumpy in my, when I was running, he jumped me and he threw me on the floor.
Flashlight 50?
I heard her screaming from down the road. It was awful.
Where'd the bear last run off to?
That way.
That way?
I was.
Okay.
But I love my dog.
What kind of dog is it?
Black lab.
She's a black lab.
All right, so 80 was treated for all of her terrible, cuts. And thankfully, nothing was life-threatening. And the black lab that she told the officers was missing eventually, so happy to say, found unharmed. Turns out that black bear was lumbering along with 3 pretty big bear cubs at the time of the attack. Clue that. Joining me live now to discuss is Forrest Galante, who's host of Extinct or Alive on Animal Planet and also Mysterious Creatures with Forrest Galante. All right, Forrest, so the sad part of this story, other than 80, really had an awful night, was that they actually had to dart the bear, with a tranquilizer and then euthanize that bear. They had to kill the mama bear. And a lot of people are very upset. A lot of neighbors said that bear lived there for 7 to 8 years without any incidents. So walk me sort of off the ledge as to why people shouldn't be so upset about that.
Well, to be honest, I'm probably in your court and those neighbors' court, which is that, the law states that Florida Fish and Wildlife has to protect public safety. And what that means is any animal that's a problem animal is going to be euthanized. But in my opinion, this was not a problem animal. And what I mean by that is the fact that it had been there for 7 or 8 years, it had never actually harmed anybody. Clearly, it wasn't attempting to actually kill this woman. I think it just got startled and reacted out of fright. Tells me that this animal was just shocked to have this person near her bear cubs and sort of behaved as a bear should behave. If you want my opinion, Florida Fish and Wildlife probably should have darted, tranquilized the bear, and relocated it instead of euthanizing it. There are only 4,000 bears. Pardon me.
Yeah, they're not that populous. And it brings me to the other question, which is why everybody, is saying, can't you dart the bear and then dart the cubs and move the whole happy family somewhere safe?
You could. I mean, that's a difficult question because bears have home ranges. They're used to being in a certain location. And, this particular female had 3 older cubs. I think they were yearlings is what I read. So they didn't necessarily need their mother any longer. But regardless, it's a bear mom with bear mom instincts, right? So she's protecting her cubs when she gets startled. And if you come between a bear and its babies, there's going to be problems. So my opinion is that although they may have followed the law, it's somewhat unethical to have actually killed that bear. They should have relocated the entire family.
Can you give me 20 seconds on these 100-pound cubs? I mean, that's a big animal, but yeah, it's a cub. It's a baby. They did not take those cubs in. They just let them do their thing. Why is that?
Well, because, and this is the good part of what Fish and Wildlife did do, which is that they realized that those bear cubs were not a threat. They hadn't harmed anyone. And so they chose to only euthanize the mother who had inflicted harm on a person. And so the thing is, when animals become habituated, they become dangerous. The neighbors said that those bears had been around for 7 or 8 years, which means that one, the neighbors were likely complacent about the bears being in the area. And 2, the bears were no longer afraid of people. And the problem is when you get into that situation, that's when human-wildlife conflict occurs. And that's what's happened here.
Forrest Galante, thank you so much for the info. Do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So if being attacked by a bear is right up there among your greatest fears, like, with being hit by lightning and getting bitten by a shark, have I got a question for you. What is the likelihood of being attacked by a bear in the U.S.? Is it 1 in 50,000, 1 in 750,000, or 1 in 2.1 million? Got the answer for you after this. For the break, I asked you before the break a question. What's the likelihood of being attacked by a bear in the U.S.? 1 in 50,000, 750,000, or 1 in 2.1 million? And the answer is C. That's, the National Park Service says the average number of people killed per year by bears in the U.S. is between 2 and 5 people. So go ahead, take that walk. And, remember, you might be in their territory. It's just the way it works. Hey, thanks for being with us, everybody. We'll see you right back here for Banfield tomorrow night, 10 Eastern, 9 Central. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.